Hello everyone, it's Mimi here. BMS working in the NHS. And today's video will be about lipids, which is part of the IBMS specialist portfolio in cellular pathology. So, just a quick introduction to this video. It will be short and sweet, I promise. I will discuss indicative repertoire, knowledge requirements, competence requirements, reflective statement, evidence of achievement, Q&A suggestions, supporting evidence ideas and some helpful tips that can make your portfolio really good. With all that said, I hope you will enjoy the content of my video and I hope you will learn a lot. So let's dive into the subsection. The portfolio offers indicative repertoire for this subsection that includes Sudan black, oil red O. Knowledge requirement is what it is expected of you to know and understand to demonstrate your knowledge is at the specialist level. Think about what knowledge you had as a Band 5 BMS. How would that differ to the knowledge as a Band 6 BMS? That specialist level of knowledge would allow you to troubleshoot, problem solve, verify, validate, help others and maintain high-quality service. Let's have a look at the first knowledge requirement, which is for you to know the types of lipids stored in tissue. What are the types of lipids that can be stored in tissue? Can you give examples in which tissue they would be found? Consider simple, compound, and derived lipids. Consider main types of stored lipids like triglycerides in tissue for energy, which are the most abundant, cholesterol for cellular membrane structure and synthesis of steroid hormones and bile acids, fat-soluble vitamins A, D, K. Also consider location of stored lipids like adipocytes, which have almost unlimited capacity to store triglycerides in cytoplasmic droplets, white adipose tissue as prime reservoir for long-term energy storage, brown adipose tissue for heat generation, and ectopic fat due to exceeded storage capacity in adipocytes. The second knowledge requirement is for you to know the principles of the pathophysiology of lipid formation and the pathological significance of variations in its expression. What is the principles of lipid formation? Consider lipogenesis and fatty acid, phospholipid, and cholesterol synthesis, regulation of synthesis via insulin feedback inhibition. What is the role of lipids in healthy tissue? Consider structural role like myelin sheaths, skin barrier, cell membrane, energy storage, protection, insulation, cushioning, regulation, hormone production, cell signaling, vitamin absorption. What is the pathological significance of lipid form and expression? Consider lipotoxicity, diseases like atherosclerosis, cardiovascular diseases, metabolic syndrome, diabetes, fatty liver and obesity, disorders of lipid storage and neurological disorders, adipose tissue dysfunction, inflammation, immune dysregulation, cancer. The third knowledge requirement is for you to know the principles and practice of routine staining and histochemical methods for the demonstration of different lipids. What demonstration methods would you use to detect lipids? What are the principles and practice of those staining methods? Consider the stains highlighted in the indicative repertoire and stains used in your department: oil red O for neutral fats, Sudan black for broad-spectrum lipids, osmium tetroxide for unsaturated fats, Nile blue for neutral fats and acidic lipids like fatty acids, Nile red for lipid droplet imaging, acid hematein for phospholipids, their principles and practice. The fourth knowledge requirement is for you to review cases and material microscopically for internal quality control and external quality control. How would you assess quality of relevant demonstration methods? What control material does your laboratory use for each demonstration method? How would each demonstration method be assessed by the assessor? Consider color balance and consistency, specificity of staining, uniformity of staining, presence of background staining, contamination or deposits, presence of nonspecific staining, UK NICA's assessment criteria, control material used, documentation. The fifth knowledge requirement is for you to know the key clinical conditions where these demonstration methods may be of diagnostic value. What clinical conditions can be detected by using demonstration methods for lipids? What is their diagnostic value? Consider atherosclerosis, cardiovascular diseases, metabolic syndrome, diabetes, fatty liver, lipid storage disorders, neurological disorders. The sixth knowledge requirement is for you to know the risks and hazards associated with lipid demonstration methods. What are the risks and hazards associated with lipid demonstration? How would you minimize them? Consider health hazards, physical hazards, environmental hazard, disposal methods used, risk assessments, regulatory bodies like COSH, HSE, or Ritter, substitutes available to reduce risks and hazards, preventive measures like PPE, ventilation, waste segregation, and safe handling. Competence requirement is basically a combination of knowledge, skills, and experience one needs to perform a job to a satisfactory standard and level. Your chosen evidence should demonstrate these competence requirements. The following competence requirements need to be met for this section. The first competence requirement is for you to discuss the application of lipid demonstration techniques. What lipid demonstration techniques do you know and use in your practice? Consider oil red O, Sudan black, osmium tetroxide, acid hematine, Nile red, Nile blue. What is their application in histology? Consider detection of metabolic and storage disorders like Gaucher's or Niemann-Pick disease, fatty degeneration like fatty liver, fat emboli, tumor diagnosis like liposarcoma, neuroanatomy to study myelin sheath degeneration. They can also play role in cell biology, research, lipidomics, pharmaceutical and food industry. The second competence requirement is for you to follow demonstration method protocols accurately and safely. How do you perform relevant demonstration methods in your lab? Do you use manual or automated method? How do you know you are following the demonstration method accurately? Consider SOPs, method used, quality control, use of control material, training, competency. The third competence requirement is for you to select and use the correct histochemical method to demonstrate lipids present in different tissues. What staining methods do you use to demonstrate lipids and why? How would you perform them? Consider the stains highlighted in the indicative repertoire and stains used in your department like oil red O, Sudan black, osmium tetroxide, Nile blue and red, and acid hematine. The fourth competence requirement is for you to select and use the appropriate control materials, maintaining appropriate audit trail records. What control material do you use for each demonstration method? How do you maintain audit trail for control material used? How do you produce appropriate control material for each demonstration method? Consider tissue type and availability, verification, validation, record keeping, traceability, audit trail. The fifth competence requirement is for you to use appropriate microscopy techniques to visualize methods. What type of microscope do you use to view demonstration methods for lipids? Consider light microscopy for oil red O, Sudan black, and Nile blue, fluorescence microscopy for Nile red, EM and osmium tetroxide, magnification, Kohler's illumination, digital. The sixth competence requirement is for you to identify stained lipids present in different tissues. What types of tissues express lipids? How would you identify them? Consider microscopic examination of stained slides, demonstration method used and the target lipids they highlight, your training and competence. The seventh competence requirement is for you to assess stained sections for quality. How would you assess quality of sections stained with relevant demonstration methods? What steps would you take? How are those slides assessed during EQA assessment? How do you maintain appropriate audit trail record? Consider color balance and consistency, specificity of staining, uniformity of staining, presence of background staining, contamination or deposits, presence of nonspecific staining, UK NICA's assessment criteria, control material used, documentation. The eighth competence requirement is for you to resolve any problems associated with the staining method, including root cause analysis, as appropriate. What are the common problems associated with relevant demonstration methods? How would you resolve them? How would you record them? Consider investigation, problem identification, corrective actions to fix the issue, preventive actions to minimize problems from reoccurring. Consider possible problems like poor staining intensity, poor specificity of staining, artifacts like uneven staining, hazy slides, presence of deposits or precipitate on the slide, reagent contamination, and so on. The ninth competence requirement is for you to dispose of waste reagents safely. How do you dispose safely reagents used during relevant demonstration methods? What disposal risks are associated with those reagents? Consider licensed contractors used by your lab, waste segregation, safety data sheet of reagents that often state disposal ways, risk assessments, local policies, and regulations that are followed, health and safety risks associated with reagents like flammability, corrosivity, environmental toxicity. Each section also contains reflective statement which is asking you, the candidate, to summarize your role in the laboratory in the context with each section. When you complete all the subsections within this section, you will be required to write a reflective statement. You also need to write a personal reflection on your training and why you chose your evidence. To prepare for that, write a smaller reflective statement for each subsection. What is your role in context of this subsection within the laboratory? What does your evidence demonstrate? Also write a smaller justification as to why you chose your evidence for this subsection. Also write what was your training like when it comes to this subsection. Writing a smaller reflective statement at the end of each subsection will then make it much easier at the end of the section. Each subsection also has evidence of achievement. This is a part where your training officer signs you off as competent and fit to practice as a BMS at the specialist level. Training officer will confirm that you can work in accordance with local SOPs relevant to this section. They will also confirm that you have answered questions set by them to test knowledge and skills relevant to this section. And they will confirm that your chosen evidence demonstrates your competence relevant to this section. You will need to be signed off as competent by internal assessor for this section. This can be your training officer, senior BMS overseeing this section, or a training lead. Questions should be set by the training officer. They need to be based around the knowledge requirements, relevant for each subsection. They should allow the candidate to demonstrate their understanding in each subsection. The questions should be specific and relevant to the candidate's in-house practice. They should also allow the candidate to demonstrate their specialist knowledge. If you would like to see specific example questions, please have a look at the video for trainers. Link will be included in the video description. These are some ideas for supportive evidence you will have to submit to demonstrate your competence in this area. Some more ideas for supportive evidence to demonstrate your competence in this area. Some more ideas for supportive evidence to demonstrate your competence in this area. I would also like to share with you some helpful tips that can make your portfolio look really good. Try to present the information in various formats such as tables, pictures, photographs, diagrams, flowcharts, graphs, or even videos, if you can. This nicely breaks down a lot of text that is usually present in specialist portfolios. Try to make it a little bit more interesting to the reader, which will be your training officer and eventually the assessor. Try to put yourself in their shoes. How would you like to read hundreds of pages of plain text? There is a saying I really like, and it goes like this: a picture is worth 1,000 words. I will make a video. I will share with you my evidence I used for my portfolio back in the day. Hopefully that will help. Also try to use various types of evidence, not just one type, like case studies for each subsection. You could use experiments, case studies, annotated results, annotated photographs of you performing tasks, evidence of troubleshooting, annotated EQA results, nonconformances, validation and verification as comparisons of different approaches and their pros and cons, control material production, certificates of course attendance with reflective statements, annotated images or charts, and so on. Try to bring in your personality. Think about the ways you like to learn best. If you like experimenting, perform experiments. Like troubleshooting, perform troubleshooting. Choose something that demonstrates your understanding, knowledge, skills, and how you apply this in your practice. And one more thing, keep the competence requirements in mind when you selecting your evidence. Good evidence will tick off several requirements. And this brings me to the end of today's video. Hopefully you now have a better understanding about the knowledge and competence requirement for this section. And I hope you also have a better idea what evidence you can choose to demonstrate your competence. And my final take-home message? Keep those requirements in mind when answering questions and selecting your evidence. Bye for now.